Hello, everyone. Hi. Welcome here on a Friday night. Is it Friday night? That's exciting. All right. So wonderful to see all of you. My name is Rebecca Stummy. I'm the senior producer of live programming and events here at LAist, and I'm so happy to welcome you all for this live taping, live show, fun game night with The Slowdown. We are so happy to partner with APM Studios for this, and glad to have you in the house. I'm going to turn it over now to your host for the evening and the host of the wonderful podcast, The Slowdown, Major Jackson.
Welcome to The Slowdown Live. Are you happy to be here? How are y'all doing? This is being recorded, so you have to be loud. Everybody's good? Yeah, that's good to know. Fantastic. Look, this is going to be an amazing night. This is going to be one for the books. Some of you are here for AWP. Can I see my AWP fans here? Good, fantastic. And some of you are fans of LAist. Yeah. And I'm going to bet all of you are fans of poetry. 2 hands up on that. Thank you. Thank you. Okay. I will be joined tonight by some of my favorite poets and your favorite poets. And we are going to, slow down. We need some conversation right now. We need some being with each other right now. But most of all, we need fun. And poetry and fun, believe it or not, they do go together. So I'm going to start off with a poem. And I'm feeling an enormous amount of gratitude right now. And so I'm going to read this poem. Anyone know the poem to express gratitude? The Ode. O-D-E. So I'm going to read an ode. And a friend of mine, he told me, Major, you haven't written any odes yet. I was like, you're right. You must write an ode. Now, the thing with the ode is it has to be an ode to something that no one has thought before, right? So, Pablo Neruda said, I'm going to write an ode to my socks. And he said, while I'm at it, I'm going to write an ode to my cat. And so I sat and thought, and I was like, what can I write an ode to? I couldn't come up with anything. So I said, I'm going to write an ode to everything. So this is Ode to Everything. Somehow, I have never thought to thank the ice cream cone for building a paradise in my mouth. And can you believe I have never thought to thank the purple trout lily for demonstrating its 6-petal dive, or the yellow circle in the traffic light for illustrating patience. My bad. In my life, I have failed to praise the postman whose loyalty is epic. The laundress who treasures my skinny jeans and other garments, and the auto repairman who clings a wrench inside my car, tightening her own music. Were my name called and I were summoned on a brightly lit stage to accept a little statuette, after staring in utter disbelief, I would thank my dentist, as well as my neighbor who sits vigil beside the dying, far away from the lights, and my 4th grade teacher who brought down 3 tape rulers on my hands as punishment for daydreaming out a window during an exam I already completed. Mea culpa. Now that I know the value of the peaks across from Flanders Hill, I will also perennially express reverence for their green crowns. I will never fail again to say small devotions for the scar on a friend's face that lengthens when I walk into a room. Thank you. Okay, let's bring out our guests tonight. Our first guest is Jason Schneiderman. He's the author of 5 poetry collections, actually 6 poetry collections. Most recently, Self-Portrait of Icarus as a Country on Fire from Red Hen Press. His book of essays I strongly recommend, called Nothingism, Poetry at the End of Print Culture, was published by the University of Michigan Press Poets on Poetry series. He is a professor of English at CUNY's Borough of Manhattan and teaches in the MFA program for writers at Warren Wilson College. Please welcome Jason Schneiderman. Jason, you are a poet, and I bet you have a poem to read. Could you read us a poem?
I will.
Thank you.
You'll hear the parentheses in the title, because when I do this, it's the parentheses. In the end, you get everything back. Liza Minnelli. The afterlife is an infinity of custom shelving, where everything you have ever loved has a perfect place, including things that don't fit on shelves, like the weeping willow from your parents' backyard, or an old boyfriend, exactly as he was in your second year of college, or an aria you love, but without the rest of the opera you don't particularly care for. My favorite joke. Question, you know who dies? Answer, everyone. Because it's true, but ask any doctor, and they'll say that prolonging a life is saving a life. Mm-hmm. Ask anyone who survives their surgeries, and they'll say yes. To keep living is to be saved. I do think there's a statute of limitations on grief. Like, certainly how someone died can be sad forever, but who can be sad simply about the fact that Shakespeare, say, is dead? Or Sappho, or Judy Garland, or Rumi? There's a Twitter account called Liza Minnelli Outlives, which put into the world a set of thoughts I was having privately. But the Twitter account is kinder than I had been, tweeting things like, Liza Minnelli has outlived the National Rifle Association, which has filed for bankruptcy. And Liza Minnelli has outlived Armie Hammer's career. To take the sting out of the really painful ones, like Liza Minnelli has outlived Jessica Walter, or Liza Minnelli has outlived George Michael, or Liza Minnelli has outlived Prince. In my own afterlife, the custom shelves are full of Liza Minnellis. Liza in Cabaret, Liza in Arrested Development, Liza singing Steam Heat on the Judy Garland Christmas special, Liza on The Muppet Show, Liza in Liza's at the Palace, and because this is heaven, Liza won't even know she's in my hall of loved objects, just as I won't know that my fandom has been placed on her shelf for when Liza Minnelli has outlived Jason Schneiderman, waiting for Liza Minnelli when Liza Minnelli has outlived Liza Minnelli, which is what fame is and what fame is not. And if Jason Schneiderman outlives Jason Schneiderman, and your love of this poem waits for me on one of my shelves and will keep me company for eternity, thank you for that. I promise to cherish your love in that well-lit infinity of forever. In one theory of the mind, the psyche is just a grab bag of lost objects. Our wholeness lost when we leave the womb, when we discover our own body, and so on, our wholeness lost and lost and lost as we find ourselves smaller and smaller, which is why heaven is an endless, cozy warehouse where nothing you loved is gone, where you are whole because you get everything back. And by everything, I mean you.
Oh, yeah. Let's bring out, this is a great start, wonderful poem. Let's bring out our next two guests. Samiya Bashir is a poet and librettist whose work lives at the crossroads of sound, movement, memory, and Black imagination. Her fourth collection of poetry, I Hope This Helps, just came out from Nightboat Books. A Rome Prize winner, Samiya's work bends genre to hold rupture and joy, breath and resistance rooted in Black, queer, and diasporic futures. Currently, she serves as the June Jordan Visiting Scholar at Columbia University and lives in Harlem, USA. Please welcome Samiya Bashir. Pádraig Ó Tuama is a poet with interest in language, violence, power, and religion. He is the fabulous host of On Being's Poetry Unbound and has published volumes of poetry, essays, a memoir, and a theology. 2025 saw the publication of Kitchen Hymns, a volume of original poems from Cheerio and Copper Canyon Press, and the anthology 44 Poems on Being with Each Other, a Poetry Unbound collection from Canongate and W.W. Norton. Pádraig Ó Tuama lives in Belfast and New York City. Please welcome him. So, how are we doing? Wonderful. And, past couple days we've been at a writers conference, and even outside of a writers conference, we live kind of busy lives. Yeah. What do you do to slow down?
The last couple of weeks I've been on an island off the west coast of Scotland, and that's been pretty nice to slow down.
Okay, we can all go home now.
I was working, but I had to walk over a hill with sheep and an occasional dog and some cows in order to get to the place where I was working. So it was pretty nice.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
I drive, actually. I recently wrote a piece that's in the current Poets and Writers, Why I Drive, and the idea of highway poetics. And for me, home, more than any place on earth, is on the American highway. And it's where I get to slow down. It's where I get to turn the phone off. It's where I get to breathe. It's where I get to find poems in the landscape. And absolutely, I drive.
That's wonderful.
I lift weights. It's really nice. I get to just be a body for a little bit.
You have three choices here. You can go to the gym, you can go to an island off the coast of Scotland, or you can take a drive. I'm thinking about the arc of the slowdown since its first inception in 2018. We've seen a lot of political changes, and it seems like the social fabric of our lives is also changing. Do you also feel changes in the role of poetry in your life as a result?
Absolutely, Major.
Yeah.
I mean, I think one of the things that's critical about poets and poetry is that it's almost our job, or what I would call our honor, to provide language for what that is going on. We're all experiencing these things, but how do we talk about it? How do we think about it? We need language to think, even, and to be able to try to create a space to provide language for dealing with everything and understanding what's happening with us and to us and through us, I think is exponential.
Thank you.
I mean, sort of yes and no. I mean, you have to write in the present, so you can't write in the past. Like, you have to, like, whatever happens is happening to you now, and so you're writing into it and out of it. But then there's also something nice about, like Gerard Manley Hopkins, or, going back into something which can feel so distant or so unchanging, that, like, when I go to, like, that work, it's the same as it was, and there's a kind of a space outside. So I feel like there's a yes and a no. That poetry kind of the sort of, there's a way in which it's both an anchor and a harbinger.
But when you say, Jason, that's kind of the beauty and tragedy of history too.
Yes.
You know, like we can go back and we can find Gerard Manley Hopkins, and it is absolutely as if it were written today, and is absolutely important and maybe imperative today.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I'm never sure what the purpose of a poem is. I think it is its own purpose. And there can be value in writing about flowers during a time of war. And there can be value in writing about violence during a time of ease, if there is ever such a thing. And so I suppose I'm always interested in how a poem can bear witness to itself, not just as an object of self-interest, but as an object and an experience, an event of noticing, because that might be something that can help to notice.
I'm intrigued by all of what you said, and I'm thinking about the poems that, some of what I just heard is that sometimes the poems are written and maybe their relevance is not felt until maybe a confluence of events comes around and renders that poem maybe even more kind of resonant, relevant. You're all poets. I know you, Jason, you just said I write because I'm in the moment. But I am thinking about poems that might be written today going forward and what someone in the future might understand about this particular moment. Any thoughts about that as writers, as poets?
I mean, I think that one of for me, the poem is so personal, and there's an incredible intimacy that lasts beyond the moment of making. And that obviously, Gerard Manley Hopkins, for the example, or Shakespeare, have been dead for a very long time, but they didn't die because they have this thing that persists in the world and that I can still engage and have an intimate relationship with. And I think that it's very hard to know in advance what intimacies you're going to need. And I would love to believe that in 200 years, the intimacy that someone needs in a particular moment is me. That would be, that would fulfill my sort of like narcissistic, ego-driven personality. But I don't know. It's so hard to know. And I think a lot about Kafka and the way in which he was producing work that does not seem so inflected by the moment he was living in. And also I love Kafka in part because during his life he was very, very funny. Like when people listen to the Metamorphosis, like they fell out of their chairs laughing, which we don't do when we read the Metamorphosis. We're like,
It's
this is
kind
horrible.
of a funny, right? A guy wakes up and he's a bug, right? That has a lot of
you
humor
talk
today.
about it and it's funny. You're by yourself and like, this is horrible. And so I don't know. I think that how those moments of intimacy interact it's like two molecules that are having a completely unpredictable chemical reaction. And so I'm scared to like prognosticate what the future might need from us now. But I know that kind of human molecule encountering another human molecule that happens in a poem, you need different molecules at different times, right? You need different people at different times. And I sort of know what I need, but particularly with like my students, I actually send them into the Slowdown because I want them to have like a really huge archive so they can find what they need instead of what I think they need, or instead of what I think they're going to be drawn to, or what that I can let them have that moment of human connection with a stranger. That I think poetry provides that we need.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Jason, I think it's interesting because I feel like my current Kafka is a meme a GIF of there's a furry white monkey that's just kind of gesturing wildly, like, what are you talking about? What do you mean? And I feel like we're in our white monkey era right now, where what? Every day? What? And you know, I have to say, like, the last year or so finalizing this book, I hope this helps, it was my dream for it to not be relevant.
Wow.
You know? I mean, I wrote this through from, let's call it the first era, through the pandemic era, through the whatever is happening. And every moment I keep thinking, we're gonna do better. We're gonna choose differently.
Yeah.
We're gonna. And that we keep deepening the white monkey era of it all is great for the book, I guess, but you know, it helps apparently, but not, you know, what does that mean for us? And at least the whole thing about the idea of hoping it helps is that how do we provide a roadmap out of this? How do we provide like a psycho-spiritual roadmap out of this and back to ourselves?
Pádraig, did you have similar goals for your kitchen hymns?
No, I didn't. I'm really very, very awkward about ever thinking about a purpose or a role for anybody's poem, because I think a poem is an event, an experience. But what I think is deeper than that is that when people will look back and look at the poems that are being written during this time now, one of the things that they'll see, whether or not they know the references, whether or not certain people are forgotten, I hope they are, is that they'll go, people were making. And that, I think, is what is lasting, is that in the midst of dismay, people continue to make. And the vocation to make, to engage in the vulnerable risk of making something that's new when you make it. So it's small, it's breakable, but yet it's precious to you. That I think, is a nurture, and it's really worthwhile nurturing that, even when it's small, even when it's hidden, even when nobody knows about it. Because I hope that nurturing that might cause something to think, well, what would it be like to make a society? What would it be like to make a neighborhood, a community, a friendship, a change, a repentance, that those two are acts of making and acts of art that are public.
It's beautiful. It has me think about maybe, you know, some of what we're asking ourselves at this moment, which is what we've asked in the past, is what to do next. And I think partly this is what we do next. We come together around art and we create space for art to be made, whether it's a poem or watercolor or a dance. And something about the testimonial of that as someone's selfhood, someone existing at a time in which it gives texture to whatever history is going to be, or whatever words we're going to lend to this particular moment. Y'all know I can talk, right? That's what I do on the Slowdown. I do some talking. And on the Slowdown, we typically follow, we precede the poem with some talking and then the poem. And then the episode is over. But tonight we're going to do something special. We are going to have someone who's very dear to the show come out, and someone who's behind the scenes. I'm so happy that she's here today. Please welcome our lead producer, Micah Kilbon.
Hello. It's such a pleasure to join you all on stage on my very tall stool. I'm usually a remote producer, so people don't often also know that I am tall without the stool. And you know what? The audience normally knows about The Slowdown or Poetry Unbound or the books, poems, projects that you all are working on is this kind of serious, solitary version that we send out into the world, the writer in their attic and looking out. And what people don't know about the projects that we work on is they're often very silly when 2 people, when 3 people, when 4 people are collaborating. And as producer, that's kind of my job, is to keep things silly. we record often on the Slowdown 10 episodes at once, and they can be kind of heavy, and so I'm coming in hot with jokes. I turn off the mute on Zoom, and I'm just slanging silly things. And so I thought to the stage I would bring just as much silliness as I normally bring. We're going to play some games. And Major, you know what I always say, and Jason's been a guest host on the show, so he knows I say this too, when it's time to get down to business.
Poem time.
It's poem time.
Poem time.
Usually it's more like, it's poem time. My voice goes up an octave. So we're going to play some games. These 4 poets are going to be competing for no prize whatsoever, but for that you to
I'd
know.
like to have a word about that. No prizes.
We can talk
We can
about it in the
discuss
parking lot
later.
afterwards. Yeah, no, we'll figure something out. But it might be my firstborn because I don't have much else to give. This is public radio, isn't it? Just kidding. We're well taken care of. Anyways, don't let me get away from myself. Y'all feeling ready?
Yeah.
Yes.
let's
All
do
right.
this.
You've no idea what's coming,
Let's
but
do
you're
this.
ready. You
We
saw
have
maybe
no
saw
idea.
no idea
We are
what's
not
coming.
prepared for this.
Not prepared at all. I
At
didn't
all.
even tell them we were doing this. That's the producer's job, is to keep secrets. Don't listen to me. This is not my school of producing. All right, let's get started with the first game. This one is going to be trivia onomatopoeia. Sorry, I said that the wrong way. Trivia onomatopoeia. And we don't have bells because this is a live podcast. And so I think instead of a bell, you each are going to select your favorite onomatopoeia as your bell. We're playing a short game of trivia. So I will ask the question, and whoever wants to answer first, you're going to have to tell me that you want to answer with your onomatopoeia. All right, Major, give me a sound.
Screech.
All right. You can vary a little bit. I think I'll know from the sound of your voice. All right, Jason.
Whisk.
Ooh, that's
Ooh,
good.
nice.
Samiya. Pádraig.
Plubbernig.
Ooh, that sounds like a little character. All right, those are some amazing buzzers. All right, here's our first question. Which modernist poet's work about felines?
Whisk.
I knew you were going to get this one. I'll finish reading the question. Which modernist poet's work about felines inspired the hit 80s musical Cats? Jason? Wait, I feel like I heard Whisk first.
Do you want to say it together?
Yeah, you ready?
Yeah.
T.S. Eliot.
Elliot.
Okay, you guys each get half a point.
Yeah. That's
All
fine.
right, you get half a point.
I'm just going to argue for an honorable mention. I'm literally wearing a cat scarf right now.
Yes.
I'm in charge, and I think
Totally
you might get a
Elliot.
quarter point for that.
Thank you.
All right, quarter. Jason, do you know what the name of the book is called?
Old Possum's Book of Magical Cats.
Exactly.
Yes.
All right, hold on. Let me just tally these scores up real quick. This is going to be like a recipe. It's like all halves and quarters. All right, on to our next question. Who faced controversy for fabricating accounts of events in the 1980s? Was it Patricia Smith or Patti Smith?
It was the dearest Patricia Smith.
You are correct.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Dearest.
The dearest,
Yes.
most beautiful poet, Patricia Smith.
Yes.
I just think it's because she's such a good writer.
She's an amazing writer.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We love her. Yes, this is Patricia Smith's love on this show. I want to be very clear. All right, Samiya, that means you get 1 whole point. On to our next question. Which poet removed the Y from her name because she didn't like the way...
I'm here to play, people. I'm here to play.
You are ready to play. Because she did not like the way the letter goes below the line.
Audre Lorde.
Yes,
Yes,
yes.
it is. Yeah, we are here to play. Usually I'm silent, so no one can cut me off.
That
but
is an obscure fact about
No,
Audrey.
but we
Way
love
to do
it.
your research.
We love it.
I have always wondered until we were researching for this about the spelling.
Yeah.
But I like how it is parallel, the two both end in E.
That's so Audre Lorde.
Yeah.
amazing.
Right.
Well, you guys are killing it. On to our next question. Which poet filled their fountain pen with signature green ink?
Whisk.
Jason.
Do I lose points if I get it wrong? Am I allowed to guess? Like, do I have the penalty for
No,
guessing?
no, you just don't get a guess again.
Oh, okay. Ezra Pound.
Ever?
No.
Plath?
No. Do we need a hint?
Yeah.
Now there's a hint.
They wrote in Spanish.
Lorca? No,
No.
you mean Neruda?
Yeah.
Wow.
Wow.
Pablo Neruda wrote in green, which he called the color of hope.
Oh.
My fountain pen is filled with an ink that is called writer's blood.
You know, my first thought was the blood of children was just the joke that was going to come out of your mouth.
That is actually the name of the ink in my fountain pen right now.
I guess it doesn't write odes.
It does not.
Screeds? It writes
Sometimes.
Elegies.
All right, on to our last question of the trivia round. This is kind of a bonus round because it's not a trivia question. It's a spelling a word backwards with your eyes closed.
Oh.
All right, on to our next question. Oh, the word, well, all right, we don't have the slide because
We're
Oh,
not
right.
can't show
Right,
you,
of
of
course,
course.
yeah.
that makes sense.
Yeah, right.
Of
course.
You know different.
I was gonna-
All right, we're going to
Take a wild guess.
Take a wild guess.
Yeah.
Saudade.
Pádraig.
Ooh.
E
Pádraig.
EDADUAS.
That is correct.
He doesn't have to close his eyes if there's not a picture of it in front of you.
That's why I was going to have you guys close your eyes.
Yeah. Close your eyes. We close our eyes.
This is how it works on the show.
That's how I write poems.
We're scraping it together. That's how
Close
you
my
write poems.
eyes when I
Eyes
write
closed.
poems.
You close your eyes when you read poems.
You're right. I do, says the producer.
I shouldn't have outed you like that. I'm sorry. All right, at the end of our first round, I would like to update on scores. Major and Jason are both in the rear with half a point. Pádraig has 1,
Yes.
and Samiya has 3 1/4.
Get out of here. Come on.
They're front runner.
Phone.
Front runner. All right, we are now on to our second game. Deluded illusions. We all know what an illusion is in the room. Does anybody want a refresher? May I ask one of our panelists?
An illusion is a reference to a work of art or another poem or some mythological, biblical, pop cultural reference.
And we're going to allude to famous poets.
Ooh.
All right, so what we're going to do is we are going to break into 2 teams. We'll just do it based on the side that you're on. So we'll have Major and Jason, Samiya and Pádraig. One team member will be blindfolded. And if you don't want to wear this, you can just cover your eyes or take your glasses off if that really does.
I want to wear the blindfold.
Okay, good. You can wear it on this side too if you don't want to be all leopard print. For the audience at home podcast, we have a beautiful sleeping blindfold that is a little leopard print. All right. The rules are simple. You will have 60 seconds to guess the blindfolded partner will be guessing, and the other partner will be giving hints to the poet without naming any of their work. No books, no lines, just descriptors.
Like
You-
biographical events?
You could also say what they look like, what egregious things they did, the names of their cats. I think they're not that hard. I promise. And Major, Jason, I'm much more comfortable telling you both what to do, so you're gonna go first.
Okay.
Let's do this.
All right.
All right, who wants to be blindfolded? I guess, Jason, you want to.
I mean, I said before I knew what the blindfolding was.
I'll
but
come bring
yeah.
it down to you.
No, I'll stay committed. I'll
Leopard print, please.
I was
let her
going
print
to say,
out. Yes.
testing my knowledge here.
This is. I should use this on the airplane.
We can maybe work out if you win that could be your prize.
Okay. That would be so sad when I lose the blindfold.
All right, team 1, are you ready?
We're ready.
Ready. Let's do it.
60 seconds. starts now.
This person is from California. And,
Frank Bedard. Dana Joya.
Has a cover that is red.
You can give personal.
Oh, get personal. Is our current poet laureate.
Oh, Ada Limon.
Yes. This person wrote a book called.
No.
Okay.
You can't do that part.
This person.
That's the one thing you can't do.
Okay. This person, if they were a baseball going out of the field, you would call them.
Out.
They're
Out?
standing on the baseball field, and they are at which
It was
base?
a really long time ago.
Diamond? Neil
Not
Diamond?
first, second, third, but
Third, fourth. Home.
home. And if you turned that person to a poet named,
Home?
keep going.
Homer.
Yes, thank you. Yes.
Okay.
Okay. We were just talking in the back room about little blue people.
Oh, yes. Smurfs.
Yes. And what are you? You wrote a book, and you are
A short person?
you don't write fiction. You write
Poetry.
and thus you are a
Poet.
and the blue people
Smurf.
poet Smurf.
Poet Smurf.
Yes.
Major, you said it first.
Oh, I did. Oh. Next.
We were out of time. since we're all right, a round of applause for Major and Jason.
I like the diamond. You're not first, second, or third. You're fourth.
When I played Little League, this is true. When I played Little League,
Yeah.
Since we're giving out quarter
the
points.
other second graders put together a committee to ask me to leave the team.
As we're giving out quarter points, you get 1 quarter point for Poet Smurf, as you did say both words.
Thank you.
All right, Jason, would you so kindly pass the blindfold down to team 2? Who wants the blindfold?
I think I'm going to wear the blindfold, mostly just because I keep talking about the leopard print.
All right, so we have Samiya with the blindfold. Pádraig is going to be giving the best clues ever.
Best clues ever, Pádraig.
You only have 2 1/4 points to go up against. I think you got this.
That's a very biased
you.
adjudicator.
Challenge accepted.
I support any team that's winning.
Okay.
All right, team 2. Are you ready?
No.
All right, well, we're gonna continue anyways.
Marginally.
All right, team 2, 60 seconds starts now.
Okay, so this is a poet who lived in Provincetown and then.
Mary Oliver.
I don't know who this poet is. This is also not a poet, but it has recently released an album that referenced poets.
Oh, Taylor Swift.
This is a poet from China. No. Different. I don't know. Next.
You don't just get next.
What's that?
I don't think you get next.
Oh, don't we?
Is the name alliterative in any way?
Let's take it back to the previous one.
Okay.
I believe in you.
How many words are in there?
Oh, so there's 5 letters, and
Good.
we
5 letters. You mean like Basho or something?
Yeah. Boom.
Boom.
Okay, so the first name of this poet is the opposite of old.
That was it. That was 60 seconds.
We still dropped them.
That was amazing.
How did you get Basho? That's amazing.
I was gonna say there's also a form that they write in that has something to do with 5s.
Yeah.
Basho, Japanese poet, wrote haikus. Well known for
Yes.
haikus.
They did.
All right. Well, another round of applause for team 2. Audience, what do we think? Do we think that we got Basho before the time ran out? I need a little. Yes. All right. So, Samiya and Pádraig, you get 3 points each.
Where's your loyalty?
Where? Hi. Yeah.
loyalty schmoyalty?
Yeah.
All right, we just have one more game. This is a little bit of a bonus round. It's the time for the last game of the evening, and this game is called Misquote or Improvement. We record a lot of episodes of The Slowdown, and what I've found is that sometimes it's really easy to mess up someone else's poem because people write differently from each other, and we will sometimes say what we were thinking or what maybe the speaker we think of was thinking, or just move around words to our natural way of speaking. My favorite incident of this was one time we were recording with Major, and the word in the poem was forebears. And Major said, 4 beers. And it was at the end of the session, and we were tired, and we all turned on our mics and just said, 4 beers here. And I think it was right. So I have
4 beers?
There are 4 of us.
There's 4 of us.
Right.
We're the
We're
4.
Sitting
What about
right
you?
here. Yeah.
Welcome.
I don't get one?
Sure.
All right. We can stretch it. So I just have one classic line that I think we can all improve upon. And so I'm going to give you each the chance to improve upon this classic line of poetry. One of you can maybe explain to me how Tennyson's poems are named, but we're not going to get there today. But this is a classic line by Tennyson. I hold it true, whate'er befall, I feel it when I sorrow most. 'Tis better to have loved and lost than never to have loved at all. I'm sure we've all heard this misquoted frequently. I didn't actually know this was a Tennyson quote until yesterday. And so I did my best at riffing on this. I think I have something better.
Okay.
'Tis better to have frolicked and fallen than never to have frolicked at all. So I think each of you can think of something better. So we're gonna, again, start with Major because you're the leader.
Ooh.
And, the way we're gonna judge this is the audience is gonna help us judge. So we're gonna read, everyone's gonna say their improvement, and then I'm gonna ask y'all to clap loudly at the end for whoever you think is the best. So we'll hold your applause until the end here, but, take notes, take good notes. All right, Major, what do you got?
So, can I see your first slide, your improvement? 'Tis better to have frolic and fallen than never to have frolicked at all. So I have to come up with something.
It's pretty bad.
Something
Mine.
bad. You want something bad?
Mine is bad.
Oh, okay. It's better to. Oh yeah. 'Tis better to have texted. No, it's better. 'Tis better to have phoned and called than never to have texted at all.
Sounds like you're talking to your kid.
That's the space I'm in right now.
All right, Jason, what do we got?
All right. Well, since you put fictional poets in my head, the best I've got is, 'tis better to have smurfed and unsmurfed than never to have smurfed at all.
Well done, sir.
How do you unsmurf?
It's not Smurfy when you unsmurf. Yeah.
Any other panelists have ideas about what smurfing is?
So many ideas.
It's a multi-purpose verb.
I see. Samiya?
Well, so my brain is stuck in this old, was it 70s or 80s TV show, the Newlywed Game?
Yeah.
And, we talk about making whoopee. And so I feel like it is better to have whoopied and been bored than never to have whoopied at all. But here's the thing, is I realize I don't know that I agree with myself.
Yeah, I was like,
I don't know that I agree with myself. Yeah.
That might be a question for another podcast.
It's one of those things where you can't do it wrong, but actually, if you're bored, yeah, you're doing it wrong. Yeah.
Set you up just right, Patrick.
Yeah.
Patrick, I'm ready for you.
I am going to bring the tone right down. 'Tis better to have lived and died than never to have lived at all.
Yeah. Wow.
We're getting really mortality-based up here.
We are.
We're poets.
And whoopee.
Time.
Don't forget the whoopee.
A little behind the scenes slowdown moment. I remember Ada told me once, which is classic, that all poems are about death. And I'm sure that's quoted from somebody else, but Ada Limon was the person who told me that first. And I put it in some copy one time, and our former editor made me take it out because he said it was a little too macabre. And I was like, it's poetry, please. And it didn't make it past. All right. So I'm not going to tell you the scores before we get the audience input. So audience, I'd like to hear, and I'm just going to judge this based off of my very, very, authoritative ear on who is clapping the loudest. All right, what do we think about, Major, can you repeat yours really quickly?
'Tis better to have phoned and called, thank you,
memorable.
audience, than not to have texted at all.
All right, what do we think about Majors? All right, Jason, can you repeat
At
yours
least I got
quickly?
a clap. Thank you.
'Tis better to have smurfed and unsmurfed than never to have smurfed at all.
All right, crowd. Samiya?
'Tis better to have whoopied and been bored than never to have whoopied at all.
And Pádraig, could you repeat yours?
Tis better to have lived and died than never to have lived at all.
There was a clear winner there. And I'm going to give...
It's death.
Is death. Death is, in fact, the winner.
Wins again.
And you're going to get 2 points for that.
Any runner-ups?
I'll go in order. All right. Are we excited to hear who won our game tonight?
Yes.
One moment, please. All right. That is our game. And the winner is, well, let me tell you first. In fourth place, tie for third. In a tie for third, I have our former guest host and our current host of The Slowdown, Major Jackson and Jason Schneiderman. 2 3/4 points. 2 3/4 points. But you guys stayed together, and I think that's really important.
Longtime friends.
All right. In third place, the host of our competitor podcast, Poetry Unbound, 6 points. It's Pádraig Ó Tuama. And in first place, if any producers are listening, let's get this person a podcast with 6 1/4 points.
Yes!
Samiya Bashir.
Come on, poems! Yes! Poems.
Well, thank you all so much for playing. Thank you so much, audience, for your beautiful applause and your participation. I'm going to pass it back to Major to maybe slow things down a little bit after all of that high energy activity.
All that whoopee.
I don't think that's how you use that word.
Whoopee
But-
is like John,
Oh my God, I was literally about to say that.
right?
It's
Whoopee
exactly
is like
that,
John.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Excuse us, we're having a moment.
We're having a moment. Samiya, congratulations. How does it feel to win your first poetry?
I am ecstatic. Let me tell you.
Yes.
Poems and poetry is already a win for me. I
Right?
find poems
Yeah.
to be just winning. And so to win at poems is like, what?
Pádraig and Jason, how do you feel?
This
She
is my
edged
second
you out by a
time
quarter.
losing at poetry games. I also lost the Poetry Olympics at the
no.
Brooklyn Brewery in
Oh.
Brooklyn in 2001. Yeah.
And you still feel this pain.
The shame of my public poetry game losses continues to accrue.
In the car on the way over here, Jason was telling me that we were going to be playing something like Celebrity what's it
Literary deathmatch.
Literary deathmatch. And so I'm just relieved that we're alive.
And I'm just going to hold somebody to this leopard print blindfold. Just saying.
It's a really
coming
nice
with me.
blindfold.
It really is. That was fun. And I want to thank our game master, Micah Kilbon. Which kind of leads me to this question about poetry and humor and joy. How do we cultivate more of this?
You know, I tell my students, for instance, always, like, don't forget this is fun.
Yeah.
Like, this is fun. You get to play with language and make work and like do stuff. Like, it's exciting. It's new. Yes, it's like writing. You get used to this idea of like you're alone and you're blah, blah, blah. It's really hard to be dark or whatever. But it's like, but also like even the darkness, I've liked to instead like moments where I go, hee, hee, hee. You know, it's the Easter eggs of poetry, these lanes, these moments, these whatever that just levitate you a little bit.
Yeah.
I think humor doesn't get valued enough, or it doesn't get valued in the right ways. Like, it sort of needs all these like apologies for it. But for me, I always go back to the idea that like in psychoanalysis, humor is often that which touches the unconscious.
Yeah.
That all this kind of like really deep subterranean stuff that we don't have access to in our conscious brains, the joke is the thing that pulls it up. And I know, like, for me, in analysis, which I've been in, I'm in Lacanian analysis. I know it's a shock to everyone. But when I have a breakthrough, I laugh.
Yeah.
Like whatever I discover is so funny. And that's kind of how I know something has come up. So I think that if we can kind of also think about humor as discovery, that like the laugh isn't just kind of, you know, a feel-good moment that passes, but the laugh is a discovery, then we can find kind of more space for humor in our poetry and our work.
I think I have two ideas about how to cultivate joy and humor in your poetry. First is to read Chen Chen. Chen Chen is extraordinary. And it's been a long time since I've heard anybody put humor down, because like it's difficult to be funny in poems, and Chen Chen just keeps on doing it. I think sometimes intentionally and sometimes not. And there's another poet, Amanda Quaid, who's got a book coming out soon. And Amanda went through a terrible health diagnosis and chose to write about some of those diagnoses in limericks. And like, we should all write limericks, and it is funny and serious, and like, can you do that? She did. So there it is, right in front of you. So I think writing a limerick is a great idea too.
Yeah. It has me think of one of your poems, Pádraig, that I might request when we come around to your reading.
Okay.
So I want to just say the joy that you've been bringing to me in your poems has been steady throughout, and this is why I admire your work. The other side of that, of course, is that I was thinking about this poem we just featured on The Slowdown that hasn't aired yet. And one of the lines from the poet Kate Daniels is that life will bring you to your knees. And if you're lucky, you survive through it. And in a way, poetry allows us to do that too. It allows us to laugh, but also to kind of capture these moments. I'm thinking about poetry as savior, poetry as healing, poetry as hope. Is there one book of yours or poem that you can pinpoint that you needed to write in order to be who you are and where you are at this present moment?
I think there's a small book called Feed the Beast, which is out with Broken Sleep Books. And yeah, when I was a teenager in my early 20s, I got put through exorcisms and reparative therapies for getting rid of the gay in me, deliciously unsuccessful. All the gay devils are alive and well. and making more gay devils. And many years later, the first thing that came to my mind was a sequence called Seven Deadly Sonnets, a bit of a play on seven deadly sins. And that book is written with something like rage, but without the rage controlling me. It's written with like creative rage, and it was so enjoyable to write it and cathartic to celebrate and to take, abusive language that was put upon a teenager and to turn it around and go, you think your language was bad? Watch what I can do. And it felt like such a celebration. It took almost 20 years before I could think about that. And it's not like I was burdened. I spent most of my time trying to forget those idiots. But it was nice when I was far enough from it to be able to look back without a sense of revenge, but with a deep sense of making. So that's the book, I think,
Thank you for those
that
poems.
helped. Yeah.
Yes. I have to say, I'm stuck on something that I don't know that I would have thought would be my answer. But it's a poem from my second book, Gospel, called Topographic Shifts. And that's maybe one of my quietest book. But, random factoid, like I and my little sister both were born with 6 fingers and 6 toes. So, you're welcome for evolving. But, obviously they dealt with that as infants, right? And so there's a line in there that's something about kind of like the necessity to like remake the body in the image of a body. And something about wrestling with that, I think, has had a lot to do with opening space for other things I've been able to write.
Yeah.
When I started writing poems when I was young, like 12, 14, 15, I was doing it in a very, very heavily coded way so that I could have something that was my own, that no one else could understand, that I needed. I felt so incomprehensible that leaning into incomprehensibility kind of made me intelligible to myself.
Yeah.
And so sort of just embracing that was really important for the beginning of my development as a writer. But then there came a moment when I really had to be able to talk about myself directly. And when I was sort of in graduate school, but for most of my undergraduate years, I could, I was very, it was no longer coded, but it was highly elusive, that there was like a lot of mythology, there was a lot of allegory, and I could only speak about myself allegorically. And then when I was in graduate school, I was working, just sonnets were like all over me. And I was Phyllis Levin's assistant on the Penguin Book of the Sonnet. And so I was spending, every day like working on these sonnets. And I was taking a Pushkin class. I was reading Evgeny Onegin in Russian, not very well, but in this graduate seminar. And I went to this reading by Sharon Olds. And she said that there's a kind of magic you can do with a poem where if you're really afraid of something, write the poem where it happens, and 9 times out of 10, it won't happen. And so I did that. I was really afraid of something, and I wrote very directly about my experience in this particular sonnet. And it's called The Disease Collector. It's in my first collection. It's the first poem in my first collection. And it's the last poem in the Penguin Book of the Sonnet. And that was a really powerful breakthrough for me. That was the poem that kind of like turned something inside me where I could speak directly in the ways that I needed to, and I could be seen and show myself like to others and to myself in that kind of way that let me release that training wheel set of coding.
Yeah. I'm tempted to respond, but I wanted to get to the poems, but I'm going to ask maybe a audience member to ask this question about vulnerability, because there's something quite beautiful about all of this. All of what you're saying touches at the edge of the unsayable and where that puts us in relationship to our work and to each other and the healing work of community. But Samiya, let's hear a poem.
Yes. All right. We will hear a poem, darlings. So I'm thrilled to, so in the middle of this new book called I Hope This Helps is a poem that is also in a new collection called Invisible Strings, where they asked a number of us poets to write in response to a Taylor Swift song, and which is literally how I knew about that. Hello, winning poems. And as not a Taylor Swift fan, it was fascinating to me to see what everybody did and to find a song that actually really just drove me to poetry. And so in the middle of this book is this. It's called Wabenzi Walks. Wabenzi is an African term. I suggest you look it up because it's kind of a thing. Wabenzi Walks. Because voices, like bodies, shadow, linger and are torn apart and linger, are torn apart and linger like the thousand eyes of night. A scorpion, a Cuyahoga, a river burns awake. Cries that were the mom, not the kid, but wait, we are not a fairy tale. Even fairies fail our families sometimes, somewheres. Why did you leave? Years ago, Metric's Combat Baby was all over my face feed. At the time, it was right on time, and all I wanted was to remain unlooked at, even today, sort of just like other people. Here's the thing. I don't want to hold on to you, dear. I don't even want to hold you. Why should I? Have you seen me? Lucky, lucky. I hope you are held, though. Well, just also. Point of privilege, says the board of directors, directing all the women how to brush their hair in mirrors on film. Why didn't you leave? Low-priced luxury goods. Click like. But wait, no kings, no horses, ideally no men. Fire emoji. We eat ourselves until we're gone. Well, I do. How about you? Fire emoji. And the colored girls click like, 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 frowny face emoji. See me. I'm listening. Here you are. Yes, you. Here. A night flight lit from my fire. Asleep while I need to dance. Look at you. Fire emoji. You. Hear you. Cut R. Hear me? Shh. Listen. Repeat. Footsteps. Shh. Listen. Repeat. Thank you.
Thank you, Samiya. Pádraig, could you take us out tonight with one of your poems?
Sure. I think most of us have conversations with the dead, and so here's a little litany of thanks to my dead friends. It's called The Long Table. Today I get up early because Mag said it's the best time of the day. She wore yellow trousers and oxblood boots and died when she was 20. And Georgie told me to be thankful when I'm busy. Relish everything you're doing, she said to me that Saturday, dead by Friday. So I make time in demands to remember. And when I read a book, I place my hand on it and honor Glenn, who worshipped words and friendship. He packed 3 times love into half a life. And when I swear from my gut, breathing out the words like smoke, just like Cahill said I should. I saw his mother at his grave a few years ago. She smiled and said, "You come here too." Not a question, just a statement. I say what I need to say because of Graham, faithful as foundations and as hidden. And though I never met him, I think about Ignatius every day, down by my prayer tree, Jerry said a lot can be achieved with precision and a bit of patience. He sang songs to rivers. I listened for his voice. Eugene cut logs into his 90s and lit lovely, lively fires. I light candles when I can. Dan made handmade gifts, so I do too. Bridget wrote a letter every day. I managed 2 last year. Brendan tried to mediate all things, singing kitchen hymns every morning, no matter where he was. I hear his sweet humming as I pick up my guitar and strum.
Oof. These poems honor us in so many different ways, and I think to sum up a line, I take time to remember. It's a beautiful sentiment that we all do in our poems. We are going to move to the Q&A now. So, audience members, we have a mic that will come around to you. We'll ask you to speak into the mic. Thank you for bringing up the lights. Questions?
Got any questions in the house? Well, I
Don't
can
be
ask you
shy.
to speak to Major. You wanted to talk about vulnerability. Shall we take it away on stage while the questions ruminate in the crowd
Sure.
and continue to talk a little bit?
Sure. I'm wondering if some would argue that vulnerability is a prerequisite to engaging the imagination and engaging language and putting those two together as an expression of selfhood, or maybe even as, I think you and I talked about this once, Pádraig, writing ourselves in the way that we discover who we are. And I think that's another kind of vulnerability. But I'm wondering if that's a word that operates in how you see yourselves as writers, as artists.
Well, I think it's a vulnerable thing to make, because it's always embarrassing. I think in a certain sense, maybe embarrassing is the wrong word, but it's always vulnerable. I used to work with young people in conflict mediation in West Belfast, and one time we got a bunch of young people with some air drying clay, each to make the shape of anger. And this one guy made something. It just was a small round shape like a football, but out of it he had what looked like these jagged leaves. They were paper thin. It was extraordinary. It's just on a Friday night in West Belfast. And when everybody was sharing what they were making, he said, "It's a bomb." And one of the fellas next to him just slammed it down. And because it was beautiful, like it really was a stunning piece that he'd made in 10 minutes. And there was something unfortunately so true about the way within which he was so vulnerable and somebody else just shut it down, slammed it, literally, broke what he'd made. And I felt like there were layers and layers in that interaction, that there was something too true about the art that he'd made, and somebody else felt the need to break it. And I think that's the point of vulnerability in art. And it's important to me to bring myself there, whether you're using illusion, to go back to our games, or mythology, or all kinds of other forms, that somehow something in me has got to that edge where I'm making something and at the edge of breaking it as well.
Yeah, being vulnerable means that someone can hurt you, that you're putting yourself in a position where someone has the power to hurt you, and you're offering that to them and hoping that they won't. And I think that in the poem, it's not vulnerability in the same way that it is in like a relationship. But yeah, you have to expose yourself in a way that if you don't, the poem won't have the power that it needs. But it does mean that there's that kind of risk in there that that you can. I mean, I try so hard to not be vulnerable in very large parts of my life. But in the poem, you can't have, like, when you've done it, you know you've done it right. And so I don't know if I'm being coherent right now, but yeah, it's a little bit scary. You're
making a lot of sense to me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I think that goes back to why humor is so important. You know, I mean, I think, the class clown is usually like one of the most vulnerable kids in the room. You know, and there's a way that when we're dealing with just rawing ourselves, showing our entrails and putting them out there for someone else to judge, and even that idea that I'm putting it out there for you to judge rather than to see like, oh, we all have entrails. You're like me, is where humor kind of can save us, allow us to kind of be vulnerable in a way that, like, as a poet, like I'm like a person like who's like, I love fun, et cetera, but I'm also a very serious person. And to be able to meditate and work through that seriousness requires being able to have humor and not take oneself so seriously so that the vulnerability doesn't destroy us.
Yeah. Wow. Yes, we have a question right here. I'm gonna ask you to wait for the mic. Thanks.
Say your name.
Hi, I'm Martine. So I know we all lean into poetry for various reasons, and the tenderness that you all share is this portal that you've all spoken about in your work. And I was thinking about, I'm paraphrasing, but Banu Kapil, an amazing writer, wrote to me once about the ability that we need to dream and grieve at once.
Yes.
And it was this prompt that really helped me through a difficult time. And I wondered if there was a prompt or advice that you all have received in your writing in tender moments, because I come back to that passage from Banu often.
That's
you.
a great question. Thank you, Martine.
Absolutely. I go back to my previous book, Field Theories, was in the making, and I was sitting and having lunch with the poet Claudia Rankine, and she had read some of the poems and was reflecting back what I was doing. But it was hard work, and I quote this in further word. It's so simple. It's just keep going.
Yeah.
Keep going. Keep going. Keep going. Keep going.
Yeah. One of my favorite exercises for students is to write a self-portrait poem. Write a poem to yourself. This emerges in various ways. Some people will write a letter to their younger self in this kind of consoling, beautiful, heart-rending way that really is them writing a letter to who they are now. The other self-portrait poem, I think, has to do with giving your, Whitman said, we contain multitudes. And I think that's a great exercise for any writer to imagine the various parts of themselves that don't show up in their day-to-day interaction. And that has been really a very radical pedagogical tool for me with students who are not allowed to be themselves in their day-to-day lives. And what emerges out of that is some very powerful words that all of us in the room together can acknowledge and say, welcome into the world. And it's been just a gorgeous, I've been teaching the self-portrait poem for almost a decade and a half now. It's one of the most powerful, I think, assignments you can give to yourself. In America, there was a editor who gave this assignment to writers after Borges, the great Argentinian writer, who first, I shouldn't say first, but he popularized it by writing a piece called Borges and I. Yeah.
Marie Howe has a great prompt that she gives, which is to say, that thing you want to write about, that event. What happened next door? Or what about the next day? To just expand time and space in very tangible ways. Marie has this book about her second youngest brother who died of HIV-related complications in 1989, I think, or 1990. And I asked her once, I said, what happened right after? And she said, one of the siblings, there's 9 siblings, and one of the siblings said, I'll make sandwiches for everybody. And then when the sandwiches were made, somebody said, I hate ham. And somebody else said, give me the ham, give me the ham, give me the ham. And she said, while that was happening, we heard a body bag being closed. And so much is there, and it's about the room next door. And I think that's a very tangible way to expand these seemingly abstract concepts of time and space, to literally look at next door, or right before or right after.
I think that for me, the poem is kind of this journey to coherence. And that when I get to the other side of the poem, when the poem is finished, I make sense in the poem, and the poem makes sense in a way that I don't feel like I do on a day-to-day basis. And the poem is smarter than I am. Like, the poem knows more than I do. And the exercise that I often give people, and that I use myself, is to write the poem and turn the page and write the poem again, and turn the page and write the poem again. And you don't realize how many different versions and how many different tangents happen when you do that. And then as you kind of put them all together, then that kind of coherence can come out of that process.
Wow. We have 2 questions up here, Mike.
Say your name to the microphone.
Tony?
You're even question, yes.
Hi. My question is about how you decide where to direct your vision, because a lot of poetry can the eyes are turning back onto your own experience, as opposed to turning your eyes outward to somewhere else. And how do you weigh that? How does that come about for each of you, or any of you?
Yeah. One of the most important evolutions in my writing life occurred when I decided that I was going to turn the gaze inward. I had been a political poet, I'd been an activist on campus. My inheritance of poets like Amiri Baraka and Sonia Sanchez was to kind of speak to the realities of injustice. That made for an important poem and an important utterance. But I started to read poets, some of them actually appeared on screen, for whom it was as radical to turn the gaze towards the self. And in fact, I realized to some extent the rage that I was expressing was because it was not systematic or structural, but it was very, very local. Now, there's a relationship, of course, but it has allowed me to be comfortable with, which not all poets are, to be comfortable with, and this is maybe a bias as a reader too, with folks who are going to lay bare and be vulnerable and give us both the political edges of our reality, but also those edges of ourselves that we shut down. And I am ever grateful because I know these poems were written out of circumstances that were quite acute in some instances. The pressures were emotionally high, but there's a certain kind of courage, I think. Now, I write about the natural world. I write about family. I write about, much to the chagrin of my family, some of what's happened in our lives. But I so believe we throw it all in. The music we listen to, the movies that we see, it all finds a way and has a space the poets that we read, the philosophers that we encounter. My barber shows up in my poem. I think it's a great way of pushing yourself, I think, away from the solipsism that can happen when you also gaze outward. And there's this dance, I think, in between the two. Maybe dependent upon the poem that's being written at that time.
I wish I could control my obsessions. I wish I were in charge of what it is that keeps churning through me and that needs to kind of come out in the poems, and that I need the poem to make sense of. And so what I don't know that worries me, that kind of pushes itself to the surface, is to some extent out of my control, which sounds silly, but I'm not a mystic, and yet it does often feel like that travels through me in a way that I can't decide on. And sometimes, the poems I don't show them to anyone because I think they might hurt someone, because I think that I just don't want to send them into the world. But those obsessions are not under my control.
I think a lot about pronouns, just as a writer, right? But for me as a person, I realize clearly, like, the only pronoun that really makes sense for me is the Jamaican I and I, right? I and I. All of we are one. And so then I also trace back to, I moved to LA when I was like 19 and studied with this crazy old vaudevillian. And he had this phrase, Dr. Desmond, called awareness is the chief motivation to art. And he forced us to kind of say this again and again. And for me, that idea of awareness is outside and inside, is the I that is you and the I that is me. And so I really must be engaged with both. I can't be lost in myself, because it's easy to then forget that myself is also yourself.
Preach.
I think for me, the intuition for me when writing a poem is towards sound and feeling. And often I'm choosing language that is based on an intuitive approach to sound and feeling that's in response to something that's drawing me out. And that can often be a music that I'm trying to tune myself into, rather than something that I feel like I'm composing. What I can do is to try to see. The Irish word for poet is fila, which comes from the same root word as to see. And so therefore I'm interested in the midst of sound and feeling to place furniture into the space of the poem that is demonstrating that whether I'm looking out or looking in, that I'm trying to see something. And I'm hesitant ever to say that there is a morality to writing, but that is where I try to put a morality to my imagination, to make sure that I'm not just seeing something that's convenient for me.
It's wonderful. I want to honor someone's hand. We're run out of time, but maybe one of us could. The young lady right here. Yeah.
Mine's kind of less depressing, if that makes you feel any better. Oh, okay. Hi. Sorry. I normally wouldn't ask this question, but I had this conversation in the car, so I was just curious. I've been kind of writing poems since I was 15, and I'm 27 now. So I have a lot of files of poems that I believe are truly terrible, and I hoard them. And I write titles like horrible poem that I think will never see the light of day, or sucky thing that I don't know why I wrote this. And I just keep them there. And I don't know if I keep them there for humility, or if I think that I'll find inspiration in them one day, or what. And I just want to know, am I the only one who has a weird poem hoarding problem for things that you truly believe are bad that you have written?
I think you're doing it right.
There's a giant yellow binder, and I know. I'm older than you are, so it was, they're all on actual loose leaf paper in a yellow binder. Yes, and I know exactly where they are. And if ever I think that I think that a poem is so bad that I don't think a poet has a future, it's right there. and I can check, right? Yeah.
Well, we are out of time, and I want to thank our guests, Pádraig, Samiya, and Jason.
And a round of applause. A round of applause for our host, Major Jackson, as well. Thank you all so much for joining us tonight. It's been a pleasure to have you in the audience. I wanted to give a huge thank you to the folks at LAist and here at the Crawford in Pasadena. We are so grateful to be here. And also wanted to remind everyone that we are a public media program. And if you love this show, we would love to be supported by you. You can donate. If you are at the AWP conference, we have tote bags that we can give you for a donation. Anyways, we love you, and we're grateful to have you with us here tonight and as listeners of the show. And a round of applause to all of you. Well, thank you so much. Get home safe.